I had a question from someone recently saying that they were doing everything right, but they weren't seeing any body composition progress on the scales. And this sparked the question on what you should use if scales aren't the right tool for you.
Well, what I do for all of my clients is I'm actually pretty pro scale weight, where I have all my clients who are checking in every 2 weeks submit their body weight, scale weight, but I also want to see your body circumference measurements, especially your waist circumference, and progress pictures. And those are the bare minimum 3 things that I ask for to assess how body composition might be changing over time.
So what I used to do with clients is, firstly, if someone doesn't have a body composition goal, that's fine. If someone's going to the gym and they're training for health, I might not care about body composition at all. Now, if someone is very lean and they're trying to build muscle, that is a very slow process. So relying on scales alone can be very difficult. Likewise, if someone is recomping and they're losing body fat and gaining muscle tissue at the same time, seeing progress on the scales isn't necessarily going to happen. So the question is how you then tie in other forms of measurement with it. And I do something similar. So I used to use a waist measurement, for example, because if someone had a high percentage body fat to begin with, and they were recomping and they were resistance training, even if the scales weren't moving much, they might notice that their waist measurement is going down, because it doesn't matter how much you train your abs, they're never likely to be hugely bulky. So what I used to do with clients is use 2 measurements, if that's all what they wanted to do, keep it basic, and that was waist and body weight, and that was it.
Right.
Now, in terms of progress photos, I use them if someone can take them consistently. So is the lighting the same? Is the posing the same? Because if not,
it's hard to see if you're actually making changes over time, because what I see happening a lot is people might change their outfit every time they take progress photos, or they change the location in which they're taking their photos. And then what you mentioned, lighting, angle, all of these things. So if you're not being very consistent with your progress pictures conditions, that can make for not really being able to tell. And also posing too. How are you posing? Are you flexed? Are you relaxed? Because otherwise it's hard to put them side by side and be like, well, these 3 variables have now changed, so it's hard to really see much of a difference. But as far as progress pictures, I would say those are more of a long-term thing, where you won't expect to see necessarily visible change 2 weeks apart, but maybe 3 or 6 months down the road, you'll pull them up and really be able to see a difference there.
Yeah, so I kind of had something similar. I didn't take any progress photos when I started training, but then after 6 months and 12 months, I kind of wish that I had, because I've forgotten how I looked before.
Yep.
And yes, you can look at old photos of yourself, but if one of them is a selfie and one of them's a holiday photo with you with friends, it can be very difficult to gauge it. Now, I don't tend to recommend things like bioelectrical impedance analysis devices, just because the margin of error for a lot of people, some people can become so focused on the number, like, oh, it said I'm 21.8% now, and then I went back and I'm 20.9%, like, is that good? And they become so focused on the number, they forget the margin of error is even larger than the difference between the 2 measurements. Yeah.
I've never had a client I've never asked them what is your body fat percentage, because 1, that, but 2, I think a lot of people are very inaccurate with guessing their own body fat percentage in the first place. So I do like to try and use slightly more objective measurements, more quantitative, like, the waist measurement is pretty indicative of body fat changes and so on. So I don't ever need body fat. I don't ever need any of that.
So what are the cliff notes? I would say that if you're training for body composition and you are the type of person that wants numerical progress, some people don't, and that's totally fine. Scales on their own can be tricky, because if someone has, for example, a higher body fat measurement and they're recomping, it's not going to tell you what's going on. But combining it with something else, such as a waist circumference, or even something I used to do with clients, which I loved because it was so low maintenance, is I would ask them to keep 1 pair of jeans, non-stretchy, that fit them well when they started. And that was it, because they didn't have to constantly track their progress, which can mess with some people psychologically. But it's nice after 6 months if they try a pair of jeans on and go, holy shit balls, I didn't realise how much I changed until I did that.
Yeah. You should also look at, as much as you can, how your performance in the gym is changing over time, because that should be somewhat reflective of changes in body composition as well.
Yeah, so for muscle gain, for the muscle gain progress, because it is so low, I almost put that to one side. If someone's gaining 1 pound of muscle tissue a month, 12 pounds a year is a lot. So the rate of progress is so slow, I tend to rely on gym progress. Are you lifting more on these exercises? If so, and we assume your nutrition is on point, there's a good likelihood that you're gaining lean body mass. That's pretty much it. Signed off.